I stared at my phone, unable to process the words glowing on the screen. "Andy, do not call or come over. We are done." From my own mother. My hands shook as I typed back. "Got it. Consider it your last wish." Within seconds, my phone exploded with messages from family members. Angry accusations. Demands to apologize. Threats. But something inside me had finally snapped after years of manipulation. This toxic cycle would end today. I never imagined what it would cost me, or how I would ultimately shut her up forever. Growing up with my mother, Patricia, was like walking through a minefield blindfolded. You never knew when your next step would trigger an explosion of anger, tears, or the worst of all, the silent treatment that could last for days. As an only child until I was 10, I bore the full weight of her emotional needs. "Andy, if you really loved me, you would," became the soundtrack of my childhood. If I really loved her, I would skip baseball practice to help her organize the garage. If I really loved her, I would tell Dad that her spending wasn't that bad when he discovered the credit card bills. If I really loved her, I would cancel plans with friends because she suddenly felt unwell. By the time I reached high school, I had become an expert at anticipating her moods and adjusting my behavior accordingly. My father, Jack, retreated into longer work hours, leaving me to manage her emotions. When my little sister Amanda was born, I felt a strange mix of relief and worry that her attention would be divided. Worry for what Amanda would endure. College was my escape. I chose the University of Washington, 3,000 miles from our New Jersey home. Those 4 years gave me room to breathe, to discover who I was without the suffocation of her expectations. After graduation, I settled in Seattle, building a career in architectural design that I loved. My visits home became strategically planned holidays, where I stayed at hotels rather than the house, limiting exposure to the inevitable emotional storms. For years, this careful distance worked. I built a life, made friends, had relationships that ultimately fizzled because, as one girlfriend put it, "You keep waiting for me to become your mother." I couldn't argue with her assessment. Then, at 32, I met Jessica, a kindergarten teacher with freckles scattered across her nose and a laugh that made everyone around her smile. For the first time, I found myself in a relationship that felt effortless, where I didn't flinch when she raised her voice in excitement or analyze every expression for hidden disappointment. After 18 months together, I proposed on a ferry crossing Puget Sound, the Seattle skyline glittering behind us. The engagement brought an inevitable question. When would she meet my family? I had shared enough for Jessica to understand the complications, but not the full extent. Against my better judgment, we planned a trip east, timing it around my parents' 35th wedding anniversary. From the moment we arrived, my mother's disapproval was palpable. Her hugs were stiff, her smile tight. At dinner, she asked Jessica question after question, each one probing for weaknesses, inadequacies. Kindergarten teaching must be so simple. Have you ever considered a more challenging grade level? That dress is certainly casual. We usually dress for dinner here. Andy always said he wanted to marry someone who could give him at least 3 children. Is that still the plan, Jessica? I had never said any such thing. Jessica handled it with remarkable grace. But I caught her in the guest bathroom later, hands gripping the sink, taking deep breaths. "It will get better," I promised, not believing my own words. The anniversary dinner was a disaster. My announcement of our engagement was met with my mother's cold response. "Well, I suppose we all settle eventually." Jessica excused herself, and I followed, finding her in the restaurant lobby fighting back tears. That night, we checked into a hotel. 2 days later, back in Seattle, something felt off with Jessica. She was quieter, distant in ways I couldn't name. When I asked, she would say everything was fine, but the ease between us had vanished. Then came the day I used her tablet to check a flight status while she was in the shower. A notification popped up, an email from my mother. My stomach dropped as I opened it. It wasn't the first. There were dozens exchanged over weeks, each one from my mother filled with concerns about me. Andy has anger issues he hides well at first. He abandoned his sister when she needed him most. He's charming until he gets what he wants. I'm only telling you this because I wish someone had warned me. Each message was a poisonous lie, crafted to destroy Jessica's trust in me. The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet as I scrolled through them, watching my mother methodically dismantle my relationship. Jessica had been questioning everything about us, about me, based on these lies. My hands shook as I set down the tablet, hearing the shower turn off. Everything I had built was crumbling, and I didn't know how to stop it. "Your mother is concerned about me," Jessica said that evening, her voice careful, measured. We sat across from each other at our kitchen table, mugs of untouched coffee between us. "She says there are things about you I should know." I struggled to keep my voice level. "And what things would those be?" "That you have a history of controlling behavior. That your last girlfriend filed a restraining order. That you've been fired for inappropriate conduct." Her eyes searched mine. "Is any of that true, Andy?" The accusations were so absurd, they would have been laughable if they weren't so devastating. None of it. Not a single word. I reached for her hand, but she pulled back slightly. The small movement felt like a chasm opening between us. Then why would she say these things? How could I explain a lifetime of manipulation in a single conversation? My mother has always needed to control my relationships. Anyone who gets close to me threatens her. I told her about previous girlfriends who had been subjected to similar campaigns, about friends who had mysteriously drifted away after conversations with my mother. Jessica listened, but I could see doubt lingering in her eyes. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me, please." I felt desperate. "Call any of my friends, my coworkers. Ask them if I've ever been controlling or inappropriate." She nodded, but something had broken between us. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and they were taking root. The next morning I called my mother. No pleasantries, no preamble. "Why are you telling Jessica lies about me?" I demanded when she answered. "Andy, what an accusation. I was simply sharing my concerns as a mother." Her voice took on the wounded tone I knew so well. "I only want what's best for both of you. You want what's best for yourself. You're trying to sabotage my relationship because you can't stand me being happy with someone else. If your relationship is so fragile that a few conversations with your mother can destroy it, perhaps it's not meant to be." I felt the familiar rage rising, the one she could always provoke. Stay away from Jessica. Stop emailing her. Stop calling her. I think Jessica deserves to know what she's getting into. If that upsets you, perhaps you should examine why. The conversation continued in circles, her deflecting, me growing increasingly frustrated. Finally, she delivered her ultimatum. "You need to make a choice, Andy. This girl who clearly doesn't trust you, or your family who has always been there for you. That's not a choice. That's manipulation. Well, until you come to your senses, perhaps we need some space. I can't support this relationship. You can't support any relationship that doesn't revolve around you." Her voice turned to ice. "Call me when you're ready to apologize." "Don't hold your breath," I said, and hung up. Minutes later came the text. "Andy, do not call or come over. We are done." My reply was instant, fueled by decades of suppressed anger. "Got it. Consider it your last wish." What followed was a barrage. My father called, telling me I needed to apologize immediately, that my mother was distraught. My sister Amanda texted asking what was wrong with me, why I would hurt Mom this way. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone had an opinion, and all of them thought I was the villain. Meanwhile, things with Jessica deteriorated further. The distance between us grew until one morning she said she needed space to think. "This is all too much, Andy. The drama with your family, these accusations. I need to sort out what's true." "None of it's true," I insisted. But she packed a bag anyway, saying she would stay with her friend Megan for a few days. I threw myself into work, trying to maintain some normalcy. 3 days after the blow-up with my mother, I was called into my supervisor Ted's office. "Andy, "We need to talk," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. His expression was grave. "We've received a concerning report about your conduct." My confusion must have shown on my face. "Someone contacted HR, alleging you've been making inappropriate advances towards Sarah in marketing." Sarah was a colleague I occasionally collaborated with on presentations. Our interactions had always been completely professional. "That's absolutely false," I said, stunned. "Who made this accusation?" "We can't disclose that, but we're taking it seriously. Until we complete an investigation, we're placing you on administrative leave." As Ted outlined the investigation process, a cold realization washed over me. There was only one person who would fabricate such allegations, the same person systematically destroying every part of my life. I was escorted to my desk to collect my things, aware of the stares from coworkers. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "I think I need more than just a few days apart." I sat in the parking lot, watching my life unravel in real time. My relationship, my job, my family, all being systematically dismantled by the one person who should have protected me most. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning of how far my mother would go, and what I would discover about our family's darkest secrets. The following weeks brought a complete collapse of the life I had carefully built. Jessica officially ended our engagement, returning the ring in a small padded envelope with a note saying she was sorry but couldn't handle the complicated family dynamics. The investigation at work continued, with uncomfortable interviews where I had to defend myself against fictional accusations. My apartment felt like a prison, silent and empty without Jessica, filled only with reminders of what I had lost. My mother launched what I could only describe as a smear campaign within the extended family. Carefully edited screenshots of our text exchange circulated, omitting her original message and painting me as the aggressor who had cut her off without provocation. The narrative she crafted portrayed her as the heartbroken mother, devastated by her ungrateful son's cruelty. Aunt Martha called, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Your mother is absolutely shattered, Andy. How could you say such terrible things to her?" Uncle Paul sent a lengthy email about family loyalty and the commandment to honor thy father and mother. Cousins I had been close to growing up suddenly viewed me with suspicion. Family members took sides, and overwhelmingly, they chose hers. My father remained frustratingly passive. His calls were brief, always when my mother wasn't around. "She's having a hard time, Andy," he would say, his voice tired. "You know how sensitive she is." "Dad, she's deliberately destroying my life," I argued during one such call. "She's contacted my fiancé with lies about me. She's made false allegations to my workplace. How can you defend that?" "Your mother loves you," he replied, as if that explained or excused everything. "She's just protective." "This isn't protection. This is sabotage." He sighed heavily. "Just give her some time. This will blow over." But it showed no signs of blowing over. If anything, the situation escalated. Family gatherings occurred without my invitation. Social media posts showed holiday celebrations, birthdays, Sunday dinners, all with conspicuous captions about those who really care about family. The investigation at work eventually concluded. While they couldn't substantiate the claims, the damage to my professional relationships was done. Colleagues looked at me differently. Conversations stopped when I entered rooms. 2 weeks after returning from administrative leave, I was informed my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. The timing made the true reason transparent. With my income suddenly gone and savings rapidly dwindling, I had to downsize, moving from my downtown apartment to a studio in a less desirable neighborhood. Every day brought fresh evidence of how thoroughly my mother could destroy what she couldn't control. In my darkest moment, sitting on a second-hand couch in my new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize, an Alaska area code. "Hello?" I answered, expecting a telemarketer. "Andy? It's Tom. Tom Walker." The voice was vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. "Your cousin?" Uncle Jack's son? Recognition dawned. Tom had left the family nearly 15 years ago, after a similar explosive falling out with my mother. He had moved to Alaska and virtually disappeared from family events and conversations. When mentioned at all, it was in hushed tones, usually accompanied by my mother's commentary on his mental health issues or inability to accept help. Tom. Wow. It's been forever. Yeah, well, I heard what's happening through the grapevine. Aunt Martha called my mom, and Mom mentioned it to me. Sounds like Aunt Patricia is up to her old tricks. There was something in his tone, a knowing quality, that suggested he understood exactly what I was experiencing. You could say that, I replied cautiously. Listen, Andy. I know we weren't close, but I think we need to talk. I've been where you are, and there are things about your mother you need to know. What things? I asked, a strange mixture of dread and hope rising within me. There was a pause on the line. Your mother has narcissistic personality disorder. Diagnosed. Years ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? No. That's impossible. Someone would have told me. Would they? Think about it. Your dad? Always keeping the peace. The rest of the family? Under her influence, or too afraid to cross her? My mind raced through memories, reevaluating interactions through this new lens. The constant need for admiration, the lack of empathy, the manipulation, the rage when she didn't get her way. It all fit a pattern I had never fully acknowledged. How do you know this? About the diagnosis? Because I found her medical records 15 years ago, when I was staying with your parents after my divorce. She had left them out accidentally. When I confronted her about it, she went nuclear, told the entire family I was unstable, that I had stolen money from them, that I was abusive to my ex-wife. Sound familiar? It was exactly the playbook she was running on me. I've got journals, Andy, copies of some records. Your dad even admitted it to me once, though he'd deny it now. She's been doing this for decades, destroying anyone who threatens her control or exposes her. You're just the latest target. The conversation continued for over 2 hours, Tom filling in gaps in my understanding, connecting dots I hadn't even seen. By the end, I felt simultaneously devastated and strangely liberated. The weight of thinking I was somehow responsible for the relationship's dysfunction lifted, replaced by the clarity of understanding the true nature of what I was dealing with. What do I do now? I asked, finally. First, you need to understand that you can't win playing her game. She's had a lifetime of practice. Second, you need to start documenting everything. And third, his voice softened slightly, you need to decide what you want the end result to be. Because this pattern doesn't stop unless something dramatic changes. After hanging up, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, Tom's revelations echoing in my mind. For the first time, I saw my mother's behavior not as a series of isolated incidents, but as part of a calculated pattern of control and manipulation that had claimed numerous victims before me. The realization was both terrifying and oddly empowering. I was not the problem. I never had been. The conversation with Tom became my lifeline in the weeks that followed. We spoke regularly, him guiding me through the turbulent waters of family dynamics I was only beginning to understand. He sent me books about narcissistic personality disorder, articles about emotional manipulation, and most valuable of all, his own detailed journals documenting his experiences with my mother. Reading his accounts was like looking into a mirror that reflected back 15 years. The same tactics, the same phrases, even the same false accusations had been deployed against him. The pattern was undeniable and chilling in its consistency. She's like a chess player who only knows one sequence of moves, Tom explained during one late-night call. Effective, but predictable once you recognize it. Meanwhile, my own situation continued to deteriorate. Jessica had blocked my number after I made multiple attempts to explain what was happening. Through mutual friends, I heard she had started dating someone new, moving on while I remained trapped in an emotional undertow. My job search stalled as references from my previous employer were suspiciously lukewarm. The financial strain became increasingly difficult to manage, with student loans and credit card payments stretching my unemployment benefits to the breaking point. The isolation was perhaps the hardest part. Friends gradually stopped calling as I withdrew into myself, unable to explain the complexity of what I was experiencing. My sister Amanda, always closer to our mother, sent a text informing me that I wouldn't be welcome at her college graduation unless I fixed things with Mom. The family continued to gather without me, their lives proceeding as if I had never existed. One Tuesday morning, I hit rock bottom. My bank account showed less than $100 remaining. A final notice for my electricity bill sat on the counter. Another job rejection email glowed on my phone screen. I hadn't spoken to anyone besides Tom in over a week. The weight of it all pressed down until I could barely breathe. I found myself sitting on the floor of my shower, fully clothed, letting cold water stream over me as I sobbed for the first time since childhood. Everything I had built, everything I had loved, had been systematically destroyed. In that moment, I understood how people could reach the point of feeling they had nothing left to lose. My phone rang, interrupting my spiral. I almost didn't answer, but some small spark of self-preservation made me reach for it. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello? My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. Andy? It's Dr. Winters. Maggie Winters. It took me a moment to place the name, my mother's younger sister, a clinical psychologist who practiced in Chicago. We had never been particularly close, her busy schedule and distance from the family fold limiting our interactions to occasional holiday gatherings. Aunt Maggie. Hi. I couldn't summon the energy for pleasantries. I've been trying to reach you for days, she said, her professional tone tinged with concern. Your number was changed. Had to switch plans. Money's tight. I didn't elaborate. Andy. I've spoken with Tom. The simple statement carried significant weight. Aunt Maggie had maintained contact with Tom after his exile, one of the few family members to do so. I think we need to talk about your mother. Something in her tone made me sit up straighter, water still cascading around me. What about her? I've maintained professional distance for years because of ethical considerations, but I can't stay silent anymore, not after what's happening to you. She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. Your mother's condition is something I've been aware of since medical school. I recognized the patterns even before she received a formal diagnosis. You knew? The betrayal of another family member having this crucial information and never sharing it stung sharply. It's complicated, Andy. Patricia is my sister. There are family dynamics, professional boundaries. But yes, I knew. And I've watched her do this same thing to multiple people over the years. Why are you calling me now? Because Tom told me how bad things have gotten for you. And because I just learned she's starting the same pattern with Amanda's new boyfriend. The cycle is beginning again, and I can't watch another person be destroyed by it. The mention of a new target shifted something in me. This wasn't just about my pain anymore. It was about preventing someone else from experiencing the same systematic destruction. What can I do, Aunt Maggie? She's taken everything. Not everything, Andy. Not your voice. Not the truth. Her tone shifted from sympathetic to resolute. I have resources, documentation going back decades. Patient confidentiality prevents me from sharing certain things, but I can guide you. And more importantly, I can connect you with others who have been through this with her. Others? Besides Tom? Many others. Former friends, family members who've drifted away, your father's first wife. The revelation sent a jolt through me. Dad was married before? Briefly, in his 20s. Patricia systematically drove them apart, then positioned herself as his savior. It's a pattern she's repeated countless times. My mind reeled with this new information. How much of my family history had been carefully curated, relevant details omitted to maintain my mother's narrative. I want to help you, Andy. Not just for your sake, but for Amanda's, for her boyfriend, and for anyone else who might become entangled in Patricia's web. Will you let me? In that moment, something shifted within me. The despair that had been drowning me receded slightly. replaced by a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about surviving anymore, it was about breaking a destructive cycle that had claimed too many victims. "Yes," I said, turning off the shower and rising to my feet. "I want to stop this for good." What followed was a revelation I could never have anticipated. Aunt Maggie connected me with a network of my mother's survivors, as they called themselves. Former friends who had been discarded when they set boundaries. Distant relatives who had been smeared when they questioned her version of events. Even my father's first wife, Nancy, who had been subjected to a campaign of subtle sabotage until her marriage collapsed. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle, another confirmation of the pattern, and each person offered something valuable evidence. Emails, texts, recorded conversations, medical records, letters. A paper trail of manipulation spanning decades. Aunt Maggie also connected me with Dr. Lawrence, a therapist specializing in narcissistic abuse recovery. Through weekly sessions, I began to understand the psychological toll of growing up with and loving someone with this disorder. The fog of confusion and self-doubt began to lift, replaced by clarity and, eventually, a plan. As my understanding grew, so did my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every person who had been harmed, and those who might be harmed in the future if nothing changed. Including my 19-year-old cousin Jordan, whose new girlfriend was already receiving concerned texts from my mother. The path forward would not be easy. Confronting decades of manipulation never is. But for the first time in months, I felt something I had thought was lost forever: hope. Triangulation, Dr. Lawrence explained during one of our sessions. It's a classic technique. Your mother puts herself between two people, controlling the information flow, often telling each party something different about the other. I nodded, recognizing the pattern from countless situations. She told Jessica things about me that weren't true, and then told me Jessica had concerns about our relationship that Jessica never actually expressed. Exactly. And it creates confusion, distrust, and ultimately isolation, which increases her control. Dr. Lawrence made a note in his pad. The antidote is direct communication and transparency. Breaking the triangles. This concept became central to my strategy moving forward. Over the next several weeks, with guidance from Dr. Lawrence, Aunt Maggie, and Tom, I began methodically reconnecting with people who had been turned against me through my mother's manipulation. I started with my sister Amanda. Rather than trying to convince her of our mother's manipulation via text or phone, I drove to her college campus and asked to meet in person. Her initial resistance melted when she saw the toll recent months had taken on me. "You look terrible," she said bluntly as we sat in a campus coffee shop. "It's been a rough few months," I admitted, "but I'm not here to complain. I want to understand your perspective and to share some information you might not have." For the next 2 hours, I simply listened as Amanda detailed her understanding of the conflict, a version heavily influenced by our mother's narrative. Then, without accusation or blame, I shared Tom's journals, Aunt Maggie's insights, and the pattern documentation I had compiled. "I'm not asking you to take sides," I concluded. "I'm just asking you to consider that there might be more to the story than what Mom has told you." Amanda left our meeting thoughtful and quiet. 3 days later, she called. "Mom went ballistic when she found out we met," she said, a new wariness in her voice. "She said you're manipulating me, that I shouldn't trust anything you say." "And what do you think?" I asked. A long pause. "I think I need to pay more attention to what's actually happening, instead of just accepting what I'm told." It was a small victory, but a significant one. Next came the harder task, reaching out to Jessica. With Aunt Maggie's encouragement, I wrote her a letter. Not begging for reconciliation or making excuses, but simply presenting the fuller context I now understood, with documentation attached. I acknowledged the pain our breakup had caused, expressed regret that I hadn't recognized the manipulation sooner, and wished her well regardless of her response. I didn't expect to hear back, but 2 weeks later, an email arrived. "This explains so much that confused me. I'm sorry for what you're going through. I'm not ready to talk yet, but thank you for helping me understand. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. The wound began to heal slightly. The professional sphere proved more challenging. My former supervisor, Ted, declined to meet, clearly wary of further complications. However, Sarah, from marketing the colleague I had supposedly harassed, agreed to coffee after multiple requests. I never made any complaint about you, she confirmed, looking troubled. HR approached me, asking about our interactions based on a report they received. I told them everything was completely professional, but the investigation proceeded anyway. This confirmed what I had suspected. My mother had made the allegations directly, likely posing as a concerned colleague. Sarah's statement didn't restore my job, but it helped clear my name informally through workplace networks, eventually leading to job interviews that had previously been closed to me. Throughout this period, Tom and Aunt Maggie continued providing support and guidance. Tom shared strategies he had developed for protecting himself legally and emotionally. Aunt Maggie connected me with professional resources, including a family systems therapist named Dr. Ramona Chen, who specialized in high-conflict family situations. What you're describing is unfortunately common, Dr. Chen explained during our consultation. When someone with narcissistic traits is confronted or loses control, they often escalate dramatically, what we call a narcissistic rage or injury response. The key to addressing it effectively is preparation, documentation, and support. With her guidance, I began assembling what she called a reality portfolio, irrefutable evidence of the pattern of behavior, organized chronologically and by category. Text messages, emails, recorded conversations in states where one-party consent was legal, medical records, witness statements, financial records, showing my mother's attempts to damage my credit after our falling out. The portfolio grew thicker each week as more people came forward with their experiences. A cousin's wife who had been driven out of family gatherings through subtle undermining. My father's business partner who had dissolved their relationship after my mother spread rumors about embezzlement. Even my childhood friend Ryan, who had mysteriously stopped coming around when we were teenagers after my mother told me he had been saying cruel things about me behind my back. A complete fabrication, I now learned. The pattern goes back to her own childhood, Aunt Maggie explained during one of our strategy sessions. Patricia was the golden child in a dysfunctional home. She learned early that manipulation got her what she wanted, and it became her primary tool for navigating the world. Understanding the origins didn't excuse the behavior, but it helped me approach the situation with more clarity and less reactive emotion. As my support network grew and my strategy developed, I received an unexpected call from my cousin Jordan's girlfriend, Alicia. Jordan had shared my contact information after becoming concerned about his mother's sudden intense interest in their relationship. She keeps inviting me to lunch without Jordan, Alicia explained, sounding confused. And she asks really personal questions about my family, my past relationships. Then she tells me things about Jordan that don't sound like him at all. My heart sank, recognizing the opening moves of the familiar pattern. Can you give me an example? She mentioned he has anger issues he hides well at first, and that he abandoned his last girlfriend when she got sick, but neither of those things seems true based on what I know about him. The exact phrases from the emails to Jessica sent a chill through me. Alicia, I think you should know something about these conversations. That call crystallized my resolve. This wasn't just about healing my own wounds anymore. It was about preventing new ones. My mother's behavior wasn't changing. She was simply finding new targets. The cycle would continue indefinitely, unless someone finally broke it. After consulting with my support team, I made a decision. The time had come for a direct, irrefutable confrontation with the full evidence in hand. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity to protect past, present, and future victims of the pattern. You need to understand what you're undertaking, Dr. Chen cautioned. This won't be a single conversation that resolves everything. It's a process, and potentially a difficult one. I understand, I replied, feeling more certain than I had in months. But staying silent isn't protecting anyone. It's enabling harm to continue. With that clarity, I began making arrangements for what Dr. Chen called a family system intervention, a structured confrontation, designed not to attack, but to present reality in a way that couldn't be easily dismissed or manipulated. The goal wasn't punishment but boundary setting and, if possible, the beginning of genuine change. As I finalized the details, I received a text from my father, the first in weeks. "Your mother is organizing a family gathering next month for her birthday. She says you're welcome to come if you're ready to put this unpleasantness behind us." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The intervention would happen, but not on my terms alone. It would occur within the family structure my mother herself had established, in a setting where she would least expect to lose control of the narrative. "Please tell her I'll be there," I replied. "There are some things I've been wanting to share with the whole family." The day of my mother's birthday gathering arrived with a sense of both dread and determination. I had prepared meticulously, rehearsing with Dr. Chen how to present the evidence clearly and calmly, how to respond to predictable deflections and attacks, and most importantly, how to maintain emotional equilibrium throughout. "Remember, this isn't about winning an argument," she had emphasized in our final preparation session. "It's about presenting reality in a way that makes denial more difficult than acknowledgement." I arrived early at my parents' suburban home, the familiar driveway and manicured lawn, simultaneously comforting and triggering. My father answered the door, his expression a mixture of relief and wariness. "Andy," he said, awkwardly moving to hug me, "it's good to see you." "You too, Dad." I returned the embrace, noticing how he had aged in the months since our last meeting. New lines creased his face, and his posture seemed more stooped than I remembered. "Your mother is getting ready upstairs," he said, glancing toward the staircase. "She's nervous about today." I nodded, saying nothing about the real reason for my attendance. Instead, I helped him arrange chairs and set up the dining room for the dozen or so family members expected to arrive. The familiar routine of preparation gave us neutral ground to reconnect, discussing weather and sports rather than the elephant in the room. Guests began arriving: my sister Amanda with her roommate, Aunt Martha and Uncle Paul, cousins with spouses, Aunt Maggie, whose presence had been carefully negotiated in advance, and finally, to my surprise, Tom. His appearance in the doorway caused a momentary hush in the general conversation. "Hope you don't mind another prodigal son returning," he said, attempting lightness, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. My mother's reaction to our presence was precisely as predicted. Initial cold politeness, followed by performative affection for the benefit of onlookers, with barbed comments slipped in between smiles. "Andy, you're looking thin. Not taking care of yourself, I see." A concerned look for the audience, a triumphant gleam for me alone. "Tom, what a surprise. We so rarely see you at family functions." Emphasis on rarely, reminding everyone of his outsider status. The first hour passed in this fashion, everyone maintaining the facade of celebration while navigating the undercurrents of tension. My mother held court in the living room, accepting gifts and compliments, directing conversations with practiced skill. I noticed how she subtly separated certain individuals, preventing direct communication between parties she kept in different information silos. After dinner had been served and plates cleared, Dr. Chen arrived as planned, introduced simply as a colleague of Aunt Maggie's. Her presence added a professional weight to what would follow. As dessert was being served, I caught Tom's eye and received his slight nod. It was time. "Before we continue," I said, rising from my seat at the long dining table, "I'd like to say something." All eyes turned to me, conversations pausing mid-sentence. "First, happy birthday, Mom." I managed a genuine smile, separating the person from the behavior as Dr. Chen had advised. I know today is about celebration, but it's also about family coming together, and there's something important our family needs to discuss. My mother's expression shifted instantly from pleased at the attention to wary. "Andy, this isn't the time for—" "It is the time," I said firmly, but without hostility. because this affects everyone in this room, and many who aren't here today. I removed from my bag the carefully organized portfolio. For the past several months, I've been trying to understand why my relationship with Mom collapsed so suddenly. What I discovered goes far beyond our recent conflict. The room grew uncomfortably quiet as I began methodically presenting evidence of the pattern, starting not with my own experience, but with documented instances involving others in the room. The smear campaign against Tom 15 years earlier, the systematic alienation of Aunt Martha's daughter-in-law through rumors and manipulation, the sabotage of my father's business partnership. As I spoke, my mother's face cycled through expressions: dismissal, then outrage, then the beginnings of fear as she realized the extent of what I was presenting. "This is ridiculous," she interrupted, looking around for support. "I can't believe you would ambush me on my birthday with these fabrications." "They're not fabrications, Patricia," Aunt Maggie said quietly, "and you know that. You're taking his side?" My mother's voice rose with incredulity. "My own sister?" "This isn't about sides," Dr. Chen interjected smoothly. "It's about patterns of interaction that have caused harm to multiple family members over many years." I continued, now addressing my own experience: the lies told to Jessica, the false workplace allegations, the family alienation campaign. With each point, I presented corresponding evidence: emails, texts, recorded conversations, official documents. "Stop this immediately," my mother demanded, standing now, her voice shaking. "I will not be attacked in my own home." "This isn't an attack," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's an intervention. Because the behavior isn't stopping. Right now, you're doing the same thing to Jordan and Alicia that you did to me and Jessica." Jordan's head snapped up in surprise, while my mother's face paled visibly. "What are you talking about?" Jordan asked, looking between us. In response, I played a recorded conversation where my mother had told Alicia, almost word for word, the same fabricated concerns about Jordan that she had told Jessica about me. A heavy silence fell over the room as the recording ended. My mother looked around at the circle of faces, searching for allies and finding uncertainty instead. Her usual tactics: denial, deflection, counter-accusation, faltered in the face of such comprehensive evidence. "I was only trying to protect them," she said finally, her voice small. "Sometimes people don't see what's right in front of them." "That may be what you tell yourself," I acknowledged. "But the pattern and its consequences are clear, and they've hurt a lot of people." What followed was unlike any family conversation we had ever had. One by one, family members began speaking their own truths. Incidents they had dismissed, manipulations they had accepted, pain they had buried. Years of enforced silence cracked open, releasing long-suppressed realities. Throughout it all, my mother alternated between defensive anger and tearful victim posturing. But with each attempted deflection, someone gently redirected to the evidence, the pattern, the impact. Her usual tactics found no purchase in the united front of reality we presented. Then, in the midst of the chaos, my father did something I had never seen in all my 34 years. He stood, walked to the center of the room, and faced my mother directly. "Patricia," he said, his voice quavering slightly, "I have enabled this for our entire marriage. I told myself I was keeping the peace, protecting you, managing your moods, but I wasn't protecting anyone, not our children, not our family, not even you." My mother stared at him in shock, unused to any direct challenge from her most reliable enabler. "I knew about your diagnosis," he continued, the words clearly difficult for him. "I kept your doctor appointments, filled your prescriptions when you would take them. I covered for behaviors I should have addressed. And I watched you hurt people, including our son, rather than risk your anger being turned on me." He turned to me, tears now flowing freely down his lined face. "I'm so sorry, Andy. I should have protected you. I should have told you the truth. I was a coward." In that moment, something broke in my mother, not in a destructive way, but in the way that sometimes must happen before healing can begin. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled, leaving behind a vulnerable, frightened woman whose primary tool for navigating the world had suddenly failed her. "I don't know how to be any different," she whispered, and for perhaps the first time in my life, I heard complete honesty in her voice. Dr. Chen stepped forward then, her manner compassionate but firm. "That's where we can help, if you're willing. Change is possible, but it begins with accepting reality and taking responsibility." What followed was a difficult but necessary conversation about boundaries, consequences, and possibilities. By the end, we had established clear conditions for continued relationship regular therapy for my mother, family counseling, transparency, and immediate cessation of manipulative behaviors. "This isn't punishment," I explained as the intervention concluded. "It's the only path forward that doesn't continue the cycle of harm." My mother sat quietly, all her usual armor stripped away. "And if I refuse?" she asked finally. I met her gaze steadily. "Then you'll lose more relationships, not because we're abandoning you, but because healthy boundaries will require distance from harmful behaviors." As family members began to disperse, emotionally exhausted but also relieved in ways they were just beginning to understand, my mother remained seated at the dining table, looking somehow smaller than I had ever seen her. My father sat beside her, holding her hand, not enabling now, but simply present. I gathered my materials, preparing to leave. The confrontation had gone as well as could be expected, but I harbored no illusions that one intervention would magically transform decades of entrenched patterns. The road ahead would be long and uncertain. As I reached the door, my mother called out, "Andy?" Her voice lacked its usual manipulative undercurrent, sounding instead genuinely questioning. I turned back. "Yes? Did you mean it? That there's a path forward?" For once, the vulnerability in her expression seemed real rather than tactical. "Yes," I said, finding I truly meant it. "But it's one you'll have to choose to walk, every day." She nodded slowly, and in her eyes, I saw something I wasn't sure I had ever witnessed before, a flicker of recognition, of seeing me as a separate person rather than an extension of herself. It was small, and it might not last beyond this moment of crisis, but it was real. As I walked to my car, Tom fell into step beside me. "You did good," he said simply. "Better than I managed 15 years ago." "I had help," I replied, glancing back at him. "You blazed the trail." He smiled slightly. "So what now?" I took a deep breath of the cool evening air, feeling simultaneously drained and lightened. Now we see if anything actually changes. And either way, I keep rebuilding my life this time with proper boundaries. What I didn't yet know was how profound those changes would be, both in my mother and in myself. The intervention wasn't an ending but a beginning, the first step on a path that would transform our family in ways I couldn't yet imagine. 6 months after the intervention, I sat in a coffee shop waiting for Jessica. My hands cupped the warm ceramic mug to stop their slight trembling. We hadn't seen each other in nearly a year, though our text conversations had gradually resumed over recent months. The door chimed, and she entered, unwinding a scarf from around her neck. She spotted me and smiled tentatively, but genuinely. My heart leapt at the familiar sight. "You cut your hair," I said as she sat across from me. She touched the bob that now framed her face. "Needed a change." For a few minutes, we exchanged pleasantries, navigating the awkwardness of former lovers, finding new footing. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. "How is everything with your family?" Where to begin? The months following the intervention had been a roller coaster of progress, setbacks, and unexpected developments. My mother had initially resisted the idea of therapy, testing boundaries to see if our resolve would weaken. When it didn't, she reluctantly began sessions with a specialist recommended by Dr. Chen. The early reports were not encouraging. She attended, but participated minimally, still clinging to her narrative of being misunderstood and attacked. The turning point came unexpectedly. During a carefully structured family therapy session, Amanda broke down while describing how she had always felt she needed to be perfect to avoid becoming a target like me. Her raw pain seemed to penetrate my mother's defenses in a way nothing else had. "I never meant to hurt you," my mother had whispered, reaching for Amanda's hand. "Either of you." The therapist seized the moment. "But intent doesn't determine impact, does it, Patricia?" Something shifted that day. My mother began engaging more genuinely in her individual therapy. She started keeping a journal of her reactions and behaviors, identifying patterns with her therapist's guidance. There were still difficult days, manipulative moments, attempts to triangulate that needed to be gently but firmly addressed. But there was also effort I had never seen before. My father, too, was changing. After decades of enabling and conflict avoidance, he was learning to set his own boundaries. He joined a support group for partners of people with personality disorders, finding community with others who understood his experience. Our relationship strengthened as he took responsibility for his role in the family dynamics and worked to repair the damage. "It's been complicated," I told Jessica, summarizing the journey. "There's progress, but it's not linear. Some days are really good, others are challenging. But overall, we're in a better place than I ever thought possible." I didn't mention that my mother still occasionally asked about Jessica, though without the malice that had previously colored her inquiries, or that my father had apologized specifically for not protecting my relationship from her interference. "And what about you?" Jessica asked. "How are you doing with all of this?" That question was both simpler and more complex. Professionally, things had improved dramatically. Through Tom's connections in the architectural field, I had secured a position with a firm in Seattle, working on sustainable urban housing projects that aligned perfectly with my interests and skills. The work was challenging and fulfilling, allowing me to rebuild my financial stability. Personally, the healing journey had been more nuanced. Therapy had helped me recognize and address my own patterns developed from growing up with my mother. The hypervigilance, the tendency to assume responsibility for others' emotions, the difficulty trusting close relationships. I was learning to set healthy boundaries, not just with my family, but in all relationships. "I'm better," I said simply, "more at peace with who I am and where I came from. The past doesn't define me, but understanding it helps me make better choices now." Jessica nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "I'm glad. You deserve that peace." Our conversation continued, moving from serious topics to lighter reminiscences. The tension gradually eased as we rediscovered the connection that had drawn us together initially. By the time we finished our second cups of coffee, we were laughing about shared memories, the heaviness of the past lifting slightly. "I've missed this," Jessica admitted, as we prepared to leave. "Missed you?" My heart quickened at her words. "I've missed you too, more than I can say." "Maybe we could do this again?" she suggested. "Take things slowly, see where it leads?" The hope I had barely allowed myself to nurture bloomed fully. "I'd like that very much." 3 weeks later, I found myself back at my parents' house for Sunday dinner, a new tradition we had established as part of our healing process. These gatherings were different from the performative family events of the past. They included open conversations, sometimes difficult but always honest. My mother greeted me at the door, her manner more subdued than the effusive welcome she would have performed previously. "Andy, come in. Your father's just finishing the roast." I followed her to the kitchen, noting the small changes in the house family photos that had been curated to present a perfect image, now replaced with authentic moments, including several of Tom and other previously excluded family members. My father looked up from basting the roast, his smile warm. "Right on time. Can you grab the potatoes from the oven?" The domestic normality of the moment struck me how ordinary, and yet how extraordinary, given where we had been a year earlier. As we settled around the table, my mother hesitated before serving herself. "I have something I want to share," she said, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. We all looked at her expectantly. My therapist suggested I practice direct communication about my feelings. She took a deep breath. "I want to tell you that I'm proud of the work you've been doing, Andy. Rebuilding your career, reconnecting with Jessica. I know I made that very difficult, and I'm truly sorry." The simple statement, delivered without manipulation or hidden agenda, meant more than any elaborate apology could have. "Thank you," I said, meeting her eyes. "That means a lot." "I'm also nervous about meeting Jessica again," she continued, vulnerability showing in her expression. "I want to make amends, but I understand if she's not ready for that. One step at a time," I advised gently. "Let's see how things develop between us first." She nodded, accepting the boundary without protest, a small victory in itself. Later, as we finished dessert, my father raised his glass. "I'd like to make a toast." He looked around the table, at our small family unit, to honesty, to healing, and to the courage it takes to face difficult truths. We clinked glasses, the sound bright and clear, in the comfortable quiet of the dining room. 2 months after that dinner, Jessica agreed to attend a family gathering, a neutral barbecue, in a local park, rather than the loaded environment of my parents' home. My mother approached her with genuine humility, offering a simple apology without excuses or expectations. Jessica responded with cautious grace, accepting the gesture without promising immediate forgiveness. It was a beginning, small, tentative, but real. By the following spring, Jessica and I had fully reconciled, our relationship stronger for having weathered such a profound challenge. We moved in together, creating a home that became a sanctuary for both of us. My mother continued her therapy, with cycles of progress and occasional regression. The manipulative behaviors didn't disappear entirely, but they became less frequent, less intense, and most importantly acknowledged and addressed when they occurred. My father found his voice, no longer serving as an enabler, but as a partner who could provide loving accountability. Aunt Maggie became a more regular presence in our lives, her psychological expertise tempered by familial warmth. Tom visited several times a year, gradually rebuilding his own relationship with the family, on healthier terms. Amanda flourished in her independence, establishing boundaries that allowed her to maintain connection without sacrificing her well-being. On a warm June evening, sitting on the porch of the small house Jessica and I had purchased together, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. The text that had seemed to end everything, "Do not call or come over, we are done," had actually been the beginning of a painful but necessary transformation. I hadn't shut my mother up forever by silencing her, but by disrupting the destructive patterns that had dominated our family for generations. The silence that had protected toxic behaviors was replaced by honest communication. The manipulation that had driven so many away was countered with transparency and boundaries. Jessica joined me on the porch, handing me a glass of lemonade as she settled beside me. "What are you thinking about? You look serious." "Just reflecting on how much has changed," I replied, taking her hand. 2 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything. Now I have more than I ever imagined possible. "Including me?" she teased, leaning against my shoulder. "Especially you." I squeezed her hand, the engagement ring catching the evening light. My phone buzzed with a text message. My mother. "Looking forward to Sunday lunch. Made your favorite apple pie." A simple message, free of subtext or manipulation, the kind of communication that once seemed impossible but now was becoming our normal. The greatest lesson I had learned through this journey wasn't about confrontation or victory. It was about the courage to speak truth, the strength to maintain boundaries, and the capacity for growth that exists even in the most damaged relationships. It was about breaking generational patterns of harm, so they wouldn't be passed down any further. Sometimes, the most powerful way to silence destructive behaviors isn't through conflict, but through transformation, creating space for something healthier to emerge from the ashes of what wasn't working. The mother, who had caused so much pain, still existed, but alongside her was emerging a woman capable of genuine connection, accountability, and change. Our family story wasn't perfect. Recovery had no finish line, only a continuing journey of growth and occasional missteps. But it was authentic in a way our previous perfect family image never had been. And in that authenticity lay the possibility of genuine healing not just for me but for all of us. Have you ever had to confront a difficult family dynamic to break a destructive cycle? What boundaries have helped you maintain healthier relationships with those you love? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, Please like and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and healing. Don't forget to share with someone who might need to hear that change is possible, even in the most challenging relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage and peace on your own path to authentic connection.